Gurudev Shri Shri Raviji, distinguished delegates seated on the dais, guests of the dais, delegates, ladies. Well, I don't see many gentlemen, but yes, gentlemen. It is my proud privilege to be here. It has been a long desire for me to be here at the ashram of Sri Ravi Shankarji, and I think the opportunity that has been given to me today to address you on a very important topic of women and technology. I would like to thank everyone who has made it possible for me to be here this morning with all of you, and to have so many women around. I think it makes it a little difficult because you have women from various walks of life from different countries here. But I would like to rather speak from the Indian perspective, women in India and how technology could help them and the impediments that women actually face, the hurdles, the challenges that the women in India face in trying to adopt technology in various walks of life. But also let me begin by saying that India has long been cherished as the karma bhumi. And we have had sages and seers who had traversed the length and breadth of our country. The wise words that have come from the mouths of these learned sages and seers have been kept alive by the good work of great people like Sri Ravi Shankarji himself. It brings to my mind the words of Rabindranath Tagore when he said, and I quote, "I love my country not because I cultivate the idolatry of her geography, nor because I have had the fortune to be born in her soil, but she has saved, through tumultuous ages, the words issued from the illuminated consciousness of her learned ones." And that is exactly what India stands for today. Many of the issues and topics that we actually deliberate and debate upon today have long, long ago been actually brought forward by the sages and seers of our great land, India. Globalization, if I am to take globalization as an example. Today we have the developed nations talk a lot about globalization. We see the developing nations trying to compete and to come forward with their own interpretation of globalization. And in today's fast-growing world, where geographical borders are fast disappearing, we know globalization has brought us a lot more closer. But this was exactly what our learned people or persons had said long, long ago when they said, "Ayam nijaparam veti ganana laguchetasam udara charitam tu vasudaiva kutumbakam." Which means, for a narrow-thinking person, there is always yours and mine, but for a large-hearted or a very liberal-thinking person, the entire world is but one universe. And I don't think there can be a better definition of globalization in today's world than what our sages and seers had said long, long ago. And this thinking had actually brought in a lot of unity in our country. It has given us the strength not to view the society in a divisive way. And keeping that in the back of the mind, our great learned people had said, "Ano bhadra krutavo yantu vishadaha," which means let noble thoughts permeate us from all directions. And it is this broad thinking that has actually given our culture the strength to withstand the many wars that were waged on our civilization, on our culture. And today, India has grown to be a force to reckon with, and I think the foundations laid by these great souls were very, very strong, which has actually made it possible for our land, our motherland, to rise to this position in the global scenario. Our prayers in our Indian philosophy have never been for ourselves alone. It has been for the entire world. And we've always ended our prayers by saying, Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu, which means let everybody live in harmony and peace. Even if I were to quote a verse from the Suprabhata Seva of Lord Balaji, which is what we do every morning, it goes, Uttishtottishta Govinda, Uttishta Garudadhvaja, Uttishta Kamala Kanta, Trailokyam Mangalam Kuru. Well, our prayers have not only been for our world, the world where we live in. We are not sure if there are three worlds, but we've always prayed for peace and prosperity of all the three worlds. I think that is the greatness of Indian philosophy, Indian thinking, which has actually made our nation a strong power to reckon with today. Having said that, right through the ages, Indian women have always been given a high place of dignity and divinity. We have always prayed to women goddesses like Sita, Anasuya, Kali, Durga, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and so on. And women like Madri, Sita, Anasuya were always given high places of dignity in our thinking, in our national thinking. But however, I must add, with a note of caution, that women today in my country, India, live in a very dichotomous situation. We are faced with a dichotomous situation. On the one hand, even as we say that women are revered, they are given high places of dignity and divinity. On the other hand, we have our own Manusmriti which says, Pita rakshati kaumarye, bhatta rakshati yavvane, vardhare rakshati putraha na stri swatantram arhasi. Which means a woman needs to be under the care of her parents when she's a child. She needs to be protected by her husband when she is young. She needs to be supported and protected by her children when she's aged and old, and therefore she has no freedom in life. This is the situation which the woman in Indian society is actually faced with. On the one hand, we revere women and womanhood. On the other hand, we have what Asmriti says, that woman does not have freedom in our country. There have been people who say repetitively that the journey of a woman in Indian society, right from the womb to the tomb, is filled with tears. It begins with the conception. It begins with the woman actually taking the help of technology, which is supposed to assess the health of the growing fetus inside the womb, to detect whether the fetus is actually a male or a female. And if it is and happens to be a female child, then we know the fate of the female child. If the child crosses this hurdle and sees the light of the day, is born into this world, then we have discriminations at various levels, beginning in the remotest of areas where the male child is breastfed for longer periods than the female child. We have remote areas in our country where the male child is fed more nutritious food than the female child. We have remote areas in our country where probably the male child is sent to a public school to get quality education, whereas the female child is sent to a government school where we probably would say we do not have the kind of infrastructure to impart quality education. This is because of the patriarchal domination that we have had all these years in our society, which has always said that the stay of the girl child in the home of the parent is rather a transitional stay when she needs to be married off and she needs to be sent away. And it is the male child who, after being married, also would stay with the parents to give birth to progeny who would actually carry forward the family name. And in spite of giving her away to another family, with all the fringes that come along with it in terms of dowry and so on, in case the male counterparts or the groom's family are not really satisfied, it could lead to anything right from wife beating to even bride burning. This is despite all the legislations that we have in our country. Legislation which prevents us from actually identifying who or what the fetus is in the mother's womb. Legislation which says that dowries should not be given nor be accepted. Despite a legislation which says that we provide protection for women from domestic violence. Despite legislation which says that the girl child has an equal right to the property of the parents as well. This is despite all the legislations that we have in our country. So it would be incorrect to say that governments are not sensitive to the issue and governments are not doing anything to actually extend protection to women. This is despite all the sensitivity. Despite all the legislations in place, we still see the women in our country faced with such situations. So what should be the answer to this? And to my mind, the only answer that would come to the forefront would be education. And what kind of education would be the next question that we need to ask. This is not the kind of education that I am talking about, which pertains to marks, to classrooms, to textbooks, to degrees and post-graduation and medals and gold medals. But this is the education which Swami Vivekananda had emphasized about. And when he was asked what he meant by education, he said, education is the panacea for all things evil. So I think time is ripe for us to actually bring in that kind of an education which would actually sensitize people in the society against all the atrocities that women in my motherland, India, are being faced with today. And to the woman, it should be that kind of an education which would give her the conviction and the strength to stand up and say that this is my right and I need it and you need to give it to me. We ensure we give the girl child in our country that kind of an education, which I would call the right education. I think there would be no step ahead for the woman in India. Times are changing. We are seeing women becoming empowered. And when I say empowered, I think we need to also redefine what we mean by empowerment. I was appalled when I was actually watching a talk show on a national television channel when women doing very well in certain sectors in our country actually being interviewed. And when they were asked what according to them was empowerment, they said freedom. And they went on to say that if I am to be married only for the sake of sexual gratification, I don't need to be married. And if I need to be married only to probably seek security in life in terms of children, I don't need to be married. But to me as an Indian woman, I think empowerment is beyond that. Empowerment is how you actually balance your family life with your professional life, which many of our Indian women are doing today. And probably it is that which makes us Indian women proud of ourselves in the global scenario. Because we, I think, have been trying our best to manage our professional life with our family life. And I think that is what we need to even make our children aware of, that even as we talk about education, even as we talk about our girl children reaching high positions, trying to adopt and adapt to technology, it is not to forget that we have a culture that we would want not only our generation to safeguard and pass it on to posterity, but we would want our future generations also to be aware of. Now, today's topic, women and technology. I think it is very important. Today, we are living at such times where technology is actually touching every aspect of our life. Any which way we turn around in today's life, we need technology. And we need to ensure that not only ourselves, but even the future generations get very comfortable with technology. Now, if I am to take two sectors as example, one would be the women entrepreneurs who are coming on the stage, and the second one would be agriculture. And the reason why I looked into these two aspects was because we are seeing more and more women in our country, even from the rural areas, converting themselves into entrepreneurs. Could be on a very, very small scale, but yes, they are. We have the self-help group movement, which is a silent revolution in our country, which is actually trying to empower women by providing them microfinance and trying to give them the confidence and the conviction that they can do it, they can go forward, and they can stand on their own 2 feet. But taking the scenario of our country into consideration, we have almost 60% of our population living in the rural areas. What is the literacy rate? Literacy rate is around 70%. How many of the rural people are literate? I think is the question that we need to debate today. So if we have to make the women living in the rural areas comfortable with technology, with a country which has such huge disparity in qualitative education, disparity in percentages of literature, the rural-urban divide, the digital divide, I think there's a lot more work that we need to do at the ground level if we have to make the rural women in particular very comfortable with technology. And unfortunately, we have men doing the research R&D to usher in technology, but how much of this technology is for the women is probably up for the national debate again. So I think our focus needs to be on ensuring that there is a lot more literacy. And when I talk of literacy, it is not simply the 3 hours of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it is making the woman sensitive to her surroundings, the situations, the circumstances that she lives in. You take education, you take rural health. I think today we need technology. Technology that will connect our rural folk with dire health needs to probably cities which do have the corporate hospitals. We need to connect the rural people who do not have, probably they do have a primary health center with no doctors, no implements, no medicines available, and connect them to the urban areas which probably have all the facilities. We need to connect our rural people, more particularly the rural women when it comes to literacy, with the universities and institutions which are offering qualitative education in the urban areas. Therefore, today, I think we need to make an entire generation comfortable with technology, because here are women who have not ever engaged themselves with technology any which way. But of course, we do have kind of a technological revolution happening in our country in terms of the IT, in terms of the mobile phones, which are actually making many of these possible for the women living in the rural areas. When it comes to agriculture, if I had said we still have 60% of our population dependent on agriculture in the rural areas, I would say that 80% of the agrarian activity that is being done in the rural areas is being done by women in our country. The reason for that is because we see a whole lot of migration happening in India, where men are actually leaving rural areas and migrating to the urban areas in search of better life opportunities, leaving the agrarian work to be done by women. Therefore, we need technology which would actually appraise the woman on what the climatic conditions would be, what she needs to do, what kind of agriculture needs to be done, what are the seeds that she needs to use, what is the diseases that her crop would be facing, and what kind of insecticides or pesticides that she needs to use. What is the health of the soil, which will actually help her to feed the micronutrients into the soil, not adversely impacting the health of the soil. And after all of this, what is that she would get from the market, and what would be the prices that are available for the various agricultural produce that she's actually producing. So therefore, here is a country, India, where on the one hand, we have the shining India, and on the other hand, we have her poor cousin, the Bharat. And may I take this opportunity to say, once again, that we are faced with a dichotomous situation where in India, we have islands of development in a sea of underdevelopment. Therefore, bridging the two is actually very difficult. And this brings to my mind a small incident which a very good friend of mine had actually shared with me when he was the chairman for a committee that was actually interviewing candidates for the position of an innovation officer. And as this candidate walked in and he was bragging about how good he was in branding consumer goods, my friend questioned him, "Now come on, brand India for me." When he was suddenly faced with this question, he was puzzled and he was searching for an answer when my friend, quickly giving him the clue, said, "Well, if the United States of America is to call itself the land of opportunities, how will you brand India?" He just wanted to give him a clue. And pat came the reply from the candidate. He said, "If the USA is going to call itself the land of opportunities, I will brand my motherland, India, the land of ideas." Today, many of us feel very strongly that time is ripe for us to convert this land of ideas into a land of opportunities by reaching out to probably every child, every woman who's living in the remotest areas of our country, belonging to the last rung of society. We know it is a Herculean task because if we take the diversity of our country into consideration, ours is not a country by itself, but it is countries within a country, because her diversity actually encompasses geography, traditions, cultures, and languages as well. So to reach out to this diversity, to ensure that we don't take an inroad into the sensitivities that exist in our country, and to ensure that we make each one of them, child, man, and woman, literate in the true sense, is, I think, a Herculean task by itself. I was at one of the international fora on elementary education when a minister before me, he spoke for almost 15 minutes on the challenges that his ministry, that is the education ministry, faced in educating the children in his country. And as he was coming off the dais and I was going on to the dais, my question to him was, what would be the numbers of children going to elementary schools in your country? And he said, "Madam, we have 1 million children." The other way, he said 10 lakhs of them going to schools in my country. Thought that crossed my mind was that if a representative of a country with 1 million children going to elementary schools needs 15 minutes to speak of the challenges that his country faced, then how many minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years would I need as a representative of a country with 13 crore children going to government and government-aided schools alone need to speak on the challenges that my country faces? But despite the numbers, despite the geographical challenges that we have, Our endeavor has always been to ensure, be it education, be it technology, that we take to the remotest of the areas of our country. When we speak of education, we are trying to incorporate technology in our education sector. We have a very ambitious program which is called Education through ICT, where we want our rural schools also to become technology savvy in terms of bringing in smart practices into classrooms to ensure that we provide qualitative education for our children. And more particularly, we want the girl child to come to our schools, because not long ago, our Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, had said that no nation can progress leaving half her population behind. And in India, 48% of our population are women. And therefore, unless we educate them, unless we take them on the path of progress, we do not believe that our country can tread the path of development and sustainable growth. Therefore, we are looking at how we can actually bring technology to the classrooms, not only at the elementary school levels, but also at the secondary as well as the tertiary levels. We are looking at the National Knowledge Network, where we are trying to connect all the institutions so that the good lectures in one institution can actually be shared by institutions across the country. And this is very important because we do not have the qualitative teachers so required to ensure that we impart qualitative education. We need technology to take forward those women who are engaged in medium and small enterprises. And we strongly believe that it is these women who are engaged in the medium and small enterprises who are actually the engines of growth for us, because they employ the largest number of people in our country, and we need to provide employment for them. Therefore, technology incorporation into their enterprises is definitely very important for our country. And of course, at the highest levels, when we talk of biotechnology and nanotechnology, I think nobody can wish away technology at all. Therefore, I think technology is definitely very important. But again, when we talk of technology, in our quest for innovation, in our quest for technology insertion, we must not forget, more particularly in a land, in a country like India, which is a developing nation, that our interventions are people-centric and they do have a human face. And therefore, I think we are ever conscious of the fact in India that we do incorporate technology, but we ensure that we take everybody along with us, because we strongly believe in inclusive growth and inclusive development. And having said that, I would like to thank Guruji for having given me the wonderful opportunity to be here this morning with all of you, to share my thoughts and my ideas with all of you. Thank you.